Theodore Roosevelt once said, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena."
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
So that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.
Seize the day.
Whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. Who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause.
And I'm gonna stay right here and fight for this lost cause.
You've got to get mad.
I mean plumb mad dog mean.
Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure.
Who at best, if he wins, knows the thrills of high achievement. And if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly.
I'm gonna show you how great I am.
On the first day of school Monday in Woodstock, Georgia, students posed for this photo, not a mask in sight. An hour and a half east in the state's largest school district, 260 school employees have already tested positive or been asked to quarantine after being exposed to coronavirus, with in-person learning set to start later this month. It's the kind of news that has parents in Columbia, Missouri, protesting tonight.
Right now, we just feel like it's too much of a gamble.
Across the country, teachers are joining that chorus.
I'm very anxious.
Lucy Wilson teaches first grade in Columbia, South Carolina. We first met the single mom last year, working a second job in a factory to pay the bills. Her district plans to bring students back in stages.
Do you think it's a matter of if coronavirus hits the school or when?
I think it's an effect of when it's going to hit the school because it is spreading like wildfire.
The president of the nation's largest teachers union says teachers will have to make tough choices about teaching in person.
There are options. When someone says, oh, well, you don't have any choices because the superintendent says you have to, or your governor says you have to, or the president of the United States says you have to go into an unsafe building. No, we don't.
While many parents are eager to put their kids back on a school bus,
it's going to be a good day.
In districts like Dallas, precautions include taking students' temperatures, providing 3 masks and a face shield for each student, and plexiglass dividers between desks. Still, they're planning what they'll do if coronavirus hits.
The minute we know that there is an illness, we will remove the students from that classroom and disinfect and clean.
The head of the district said today, with infections still rising in Texas, it looks highly doubtful they'll be able to open for any in-person instruction by September.
Across America, COVID-19 is indeed spreading like wildfire in many communities. Teachers are having to make a choice whether or not they actually want to go back to the classroom and put their own health in danger. Meantime, there's still the danger of the students themselves. And what about athletics? High schools across the country are starting to say, we will play. And there's also a ripple effect in college. If you wanted to say everything is chaotic, it's a good way to put it. Maybe higgledy-piggledy might be a better way because nobody really seems to know what's happening in any different district, and everybody is guessing at this point. We need to stop the guessing. Let's see if we can do that right here and right now. Hi, once again, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks so much for joining us on this edition of The Man in the Arena, broadcast live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, don't forget when the show is done, you can watch all the shows on YouTube at welcometothearena.com, and also you can download every show on all the major audio podcast platforms. All you have to do there is go to edberliner.com, pick your platform, find it, go to it, download it, enjoy the show as well. Also, don't forget your comments are going to be available here on the show as well as we do the live broadcast. And at the end of the show, what are people doing in the summertime of COVID-19 without sports? You'll find out, but we'll make you wait on that one. Because let's get to business. So many things are happening in college and high school this week, and there's a lot of angry people. Maybe there should be. And quite frankly, maybe people ought to be a little bit angrier because in many places, as one teacher said, we're being given the choice. Go back, put your health at risk, or don't. And a lot of parents need to understand that risk as well. And there's an issue about camps that everybody thinks are going to settle everything for their kids looking for scholarships. Boy, we got a long way to go and a short time to get there. Let's once again welcome in my good friend who has been covering the national scene on high school sports, college sports, for half a century. I like to say that because it really makes him seem important, even though the guy is only, and I can't figure it out, he's not even turned 60 yet. He was doing this when he was like 4 years old in the crib. It's always great, and a man who absolutely laces up the gloves and tells it like it is for a long time. Larry Blustein joins us on The Man in the Arena. Isn't that right? I mean, didn't you start when you were 4?
Yeah, at least. And you know what? And listening to the opening and just things keep going through my mind, Ed, about how this is all made up, all fabricated. We're doing this to perpetuate things until after November 3rd, and I'm just quite tired about this now. I mean, it's just, I'm tired of explaining it. If people don't understand that they are closing businesses, they're opening schools from home, they don't do that. If it's just going to be on a whim, and just in the opening, I think it's a perfect thing that you had. Georgia, one state away from where we are. 500-600 miles from South Florida, right on the border, Tallahassee, Jacksonville. If you talk to people in Georgia, who I talk to almost every day, you think that they're in Alaska. I mean, they're so far removed from this, but they're right in the epicenter. I think people are closing their eyes to what's going on. Until they open them, this thing's going to keep going on and on and on. And there's no known cure. You get to a point where you get so frustrated. It's
you get
like
exasperated, I think is a good word, Larry, because we're just, it's people want to think that we're here to scare someone. We're not. We're here to basically speak the facts. And far too often there's people who are missing the facts and they don't want to hear them. Look, I get it. It's human nature. We don't want to hear that we have to stay in our homes any more than we have right now. We don't want to hear that our kids can't go to school. We don't want to hear that our kids can't play ball. We don't want to hear these things. But we have to sit back and take them sometimes and understand everything is interconnected, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about here today. When it comes to college and high school and this issue about camps, which is something you and I really haven't talked about a lot and we need to really dig into, because you made a very hard-edged comment on your Facebook page this week that we're going to get to a little bit later on, which talks to exactly the situation that we're in right now. And I think what happens is, because of your expertise, people are often coming to you and saying, hey, Larry, come on, can't you just tell us that there's just going to be a little way out of this? They come to us looking for hope. We'd love to give you hope, but then what do we do? We're lying to you. We don't want to lie. It's like everybody else.
Well, and even if we do tell you, you're not going to believe what we say, and that's the part that exasperated. That's a type of frustration that I've been dealing with, because you have all these people that believe that we could play through this. This is nothing, no more than a common cold, and just a little bit tired of that, because it's just, and I understand how people feel. If you don't have it, you don't know anybody it's had COVID-19, and certainly, and I can understand you feel infallible. You feel that, hey, there's no way I'm getting sick. But the moment, God forbid, one of your family members or your close friends is sick, or just,
and I'm there.
On the worst spectrum.
I have family members and friends who have it, and I have friends who are suffering with it, and I hear what they're going through right now. Look, there was a story I saw the other day that talked about a guy who for 72 days straight has got a temperature of over 100 degrees. He can't sleep at night. He's got to he's got to actually immerse himself in a bath of cold water at night just to be able to sleep, and he's suffering with it. It's not like it's full blown with him, but it's not going away. And then there's all these studies that talk about how lungs are hurt and bodies are hurt, and young athletes are going to be damaged for the rest of their lives. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, no, it's reality, Ed, and that's one thing that you and I sometimes will talk about an issue, and we'll get so frustrated, and then we'll kind of just pass on for it. But I will tell you this: when I turn on the news and see that somebody pleading to wear a mask because they lost their fingers or they lost their toes from this disease. We don't know enough about this that we could definitively say, anything about it. And that's why when you listen to Dr. Birx or Dr. Fauci and they try to, all they are, they're specialists in the field, but they're not specialists in COVID-19 because nobody is, because we don't know enough about it.
Right.
We have, and that's what I'm saying.
Which came down to this whole issue that's hitting the last week. Well, we didn't have a disease. We didn't have tests for COVID-19 6 months ago. You're right. Because we didn't have it, because it was new. It's just, it's the exasperating things that are said. So people, all we're doing is, we're here to entertain, but we're also here to inform. That's part of what shows do. That's part of what Larry and I have done as news and sports guys for our entire careers. So let's go ahead and outside of the medicine, which we'll talk about as the show goes on undoubtedly, let's go ahead and start, instead of high school football this week, we're going to start in college football. Because as we tape the show today on Wednesday, August the 5th, huge news that came out earlier today. Now, to many people, it won't seem like it's a big deal. Because the University of Connecticut football team, people go, and I actually saw this on social media, you mean they play football at UConn? Yes, they do. Yeah, but if you look deeper into what's happened here, why they did it, and what those ramifications are looking past UConn, it starts to get a little serious into all of college athletics and even high school athletics. Paul Feinbaum of ESPN, he's right on top of the story, and he brings up some very interesting ideas and some subplots here to the whole UConn is getting rid of football, or at least not getting rid of football, but UConn is not going to play football in the 2020 season.
I think UConn canceled because of financial reasons. They are in debt right now. They're in the transfer of leagues, as you well know. Their schedule had been decimated, and I think they made the right call, just saying it's not worth it. We're going to lose more money. We don't really want to invest in this season because it's going to be a lost cause anyway. What the bigger story in college football is, will middle of the pack schools follow them? I think they will. And then you have a couple of other things happening. You have the Big Ten announcing their schedule today on Labor Day weekend. So think about this for a second. The Big 12 is going to start on August 28th. The next week, the Big Ten will start, as will the ACC. And then you go to the end of the month, the September 26th, when the Pac-12 and the SEC. So anyone who doesn't believe that college football is a royal mess, think about the fact that the college football season will open over a 5-week stretch. And the people at the end, I believe, are the smartest. Their fans may not be happy about this, but Molly, I think at the back end conferences want to see what happens at the front end. Meaning, if those week 0 games don't go well, if when the Big Ten starts, you start seeing outbreaks and you have to shut programs down temporarily, you may see the whole thing collapse. And there's one more thing here. Safety. There was a story coming out of Colorado yesterday. A couple of players told a newspaper out there that the Colorado State coaches were discouraging them from being honest about testing positive for COVID. There were reports that their contact tracing was being finagled, that they were not social distancing. Same thing came out of the player from Virginia Tech, which I discussed with you guys on Monday, that he complained that it wasn't safe. And for all the hot air that college administrators want to say that safety is the first issue, there are some cracks out there, and I don't think this is getting enough attention.
Holy spit in the morning, Larry. I mean, if you take that and you listen to what's in there, here's the takeaways from this. And these are things that really few people are discussing. You have basically a program that is near bankruptcy. They've got to get out. And again, this is a good idea for them to get out at this time. College football in general is in complete chaos with the various power conferences. Nobody really staying on the same page whatsoever. You've got the little fish now bailing out, and they're the ones that help the big fish make victories. And there's money that goes between the two of them back and forth. You have programs that are waiting. That's the thing in there that I heard, where there's college football programs that are waiting to see what happens to the other guys before they make a decision, which seems to be smart, but again, it's going to hold everybody back because there's going to be no actual start of the season because everybody is going to see dates. And then we get this news. I'm glad Feinbaum talked about this. There's discussion in Colorado and other places where these tests for COVID-19, the universities, the coaches, somebody involved, is telling the students to help them work the tests so that they don't have to show that there's a positive on their program. That's not only frightening, that could be illegal, that's dangerous, that could be deadly. I mean, seriously, we have college football at a place right now where I don't want to get involved. I want them to shut the whole damn thing down right now, because it seems we're just walking into this morass, if you will, of lies, fraud, and everything else we possibly can to basically shovel more cash into the conferences. The health of the player, completely damned.
But you didn't see this coming? I mean, everybody saw it coming. There was going to be, I mean, in everything that you do. I mean, college football is the high and almighty, Ed, and you know that. I mean, any way, shape, and form, there's going to be tests. People are going to be encouraged not to test. They just want to keep the numbers to a working point. And like you said, something like that could result in death. And so what you're doing by manipulating and lying is actually, and it's not going overboard. It's not jumping to any conclusion, but you're lying and to protect all these to protect college football. But in the end result, what's going to happen? Somebody could die. I mean, and I'm getting more and more communication from parents now, because now they're seeing it. And hey, at first I thought, well, let my son play, but I have to think of this. We have my mom and dad who are living with us. They're in their 70s and their 80s. My dad is recovering from cancer. My mom had breast cancer 5 years ago. If my son plays and he interacts and all of a sudden he brings COVID back home, that's like a death sentence for my parents who have no immune system. So now people are that's what I'm saying. If it doesn't affect you, you don't care. You're infallible. You're big. You're Superman. And it's true. And I see it. I see it every day, where the people who, and they've turned this into such a political arena. It's just sickening. I mean, I realize this is an election year, but this is so far removed from politics. It's crazy.
Well,
it's
but
the
see,
reality.
and you're
it's
talking about
science.
the fact you talked about the invincibility factor, which I think is one to discuss. Absolutely. 15, 16, 17-year-old, 20-year-old players, student athletes, of course they feel invincible. We did.
Sure.
I mean, I did some stupid stuff in my teens, my late teens, and my early 20s. Frankly, I should be 6 feet under now from some of the crazy stuff that I did. You feel invincible.
Right.
But
yeah, no, I feel you.
The parents sitting there and the administrators, and I want to maybe move off the parents a little bit, because we've been pretty heavy-handed on them in the last couple of weeks.
We've bashed them pretty good,
and I think that in many cases they deserve it. But in this case, we have to look at the administrators, the coaches, the people in charge of the athletic associations, the conference presidents, the university presidents, right on down the line. We're still talking about adults who also are feeling invincible. You're not, because the 62-year-old assistant coach on the football program who winds up catching a COVID bug from a kid who brings it home from his parents or from his aunt or his uncle, and he or she, the coach, dies or basically is set aside for weeks or months in suffering from this. Nobody's thinking about them, but I guarantee you that coach is still going to be one of those who will say, I'm invincible like everybody else. That's part of the issue.
Ed, the one thing I try to tell everybody, and this is, this is for a lot of people who have the egos, and I understand. I mean, the world can't be everybody who's going to be thinking rational, because it really wouldn't be much of a world. So you have to have people who are thinking the way they do. So I always say, just think out of the box. Just do your thinking out of the box. Okay, this is not about you. I say this is not about you, but think about what's going to happen. I mean, you got to look at people around you. Okay, if you're 39, 38 years old, you're a parent, you got kids, you go to the gym, you take care of yourself, you have vitamins and this and that. This isn't about you. But let's, for 1 minute, and I tell them this, I said, for one minute, let's think it is about you, because you're smart enough, you're in control of your family to look out for people who are compromised. It could be your parents, it could be aunts and uncles, it could be your next door neighbor, and your kids. So you have to be the bigger person in all this. And whether you feel and you want to turn this into some political arena and say it's going to end here and it's only we're blowing this up because it's an election year, If you feel that way, then I can't change your mind, but think out of the box, okay? Take yourself out of the equation and think about the people who don't think that way, and they're going to be affected. And that's the only way I could say it. Everybody, I don't care how inconvenient it is, and it shouldn't be an inconvenience now, but you should always wear a mask. You should wash your hands. You should wash your hands anyway. I don't care if there's a pandemic anyway. You should be from the time that my mom
basic
and dad,
hygiene, 6th grade.
Basic hygiene. So we don't need to tell you to wash your hands because you already know that. But as far as a mask, I mean, if you look back, and everybody always points to every other country, look back 10 years and let's go to Beijing. Let's go to India. You look in major metropolises that a lot of people are walking around. People are wearing masks. People wear masks. They do that because they look after their own.
They've done it for years in Asia.
Yes.
When you look at Japan, China, other countries, they have done it for years. The Koreas have certainly. A lot of it is because of the air pollution issue that happens there, because the air pollution in Japan is one of the worst. But it still is a protection factor nonetheless, which then brings us back to Americans. America. We're not going to wear it because it's our freedoms. You may have the freedom, but I also have the freedom to turn you away from my business. I have the freedom not to be near you, and I have the freedom to make sure that I'm wearing a mask as well. And just last night when I went to pick up some dinner for us, there were people there, no masks, inside a building, outside a building. When I saw a couple with a 4-year-old daughter who was sitting there with no masks on anybody, I cringed. But I kept mine on because, frankly, that's what I'm going to do. Now, but as far as college football, there is another chaotic issue here because Feinbaum, I think, hit all the right ones. And you're not, and I would guess that you yourself would agree that it's a good move for UConn because they're so heavily in debt right now. They weren't going to go anywhere this season. I know that the players are going to be upset, and I think this is something else that I brought up. On social media, there were people who were making fun of them. Well, they suck, they're going to suck again. And I came back and said, but I'll bet you those players really want to play. It's a competitive thing where they went to the school they hoped to play.
Sure.
But if you look at it, UConn's making the right financial decision, and it's also a little bit of a portent of potential things to come because we've seen programs already start to bail out. How many other minor, and I use the term without being insulting to UConn, but minor college football programs are going to have to dump their program because they can't dump certain programs due to Title IX. Can't do that. So then you have to start being selective going through on some of your programs, and they may have to get rid of football. That's a death knell because I don't know if a program that dumps football would ever be able to get it back again because from COVID-19 and the economy, it's going to take years for this to come back. I think that's an end-all if you kill it. So I think UConn said, hey, look, we want to at least try, so they let themselves a wide-open berth at the end when all this is over.
Yeah. Okay. Well, stand by because one of your programs that is well known as any Power 5 program is probably on the cusp of doing the same thing, and that's BYU. This is a program that doesn't have that much money in an operating. They're independent. They chose to be independent years ago, but that's another program that you have to look because at the end of the day, BYU is so tied up worldwide in its programs and its archaeology programs. And they're in Hawaii. They're in South and Central America. They have campuses. Athletics right now is probably low totem pole for them. And if they have to push that program, especially football, off to the side, sure, they have a lot of endowments and there's a lot of people that, give to that program. But in the end, if they have to push it aside for a year, they'll do it. They'll do it. This is, they're going to lose a lot of money. Again, they don't get a lot of TV revenue because of the fact that they're not on TV a whole lot. They're not in a conference, so that they don't share in a lot of the conference, whether it's bowl games or conference national TV pictures. So that's another program that you have to kind of watch a little bit. Everybody's talking about UConn. And I remember when UConn was a Division III program. I mean, they always had a great basketball program. We know that Coach Calhoun did a great job. Gino Ariyama did an awesome job with the women. But the football program was really never anything spectacular. And all of a sudden, they became Division I. They started playing. They hired Randy Edsall, to keep the ball rolling. He's done a pretty decent job. What about the kids that are incoming for this 20 season? What about the 21 recruits that they have?
Well, this is all part of the Division I ego that's involved in college football, because there used to be Division III, there used to be Division II football, there used to be the lower divisions that you would play in. People said, we can't make any money here. Push, push, push. Let's make sure we get the revenue base. Let's get to the NCAA. Let's make sure that we get within the rules and we're able to go Division I. Guess what? If you go to Division I, it's exponentially a greater expense. And if you can't handle that and you don't have people behind you, which UConn doesn't, UConn may be sitting right there in that little luxury lap between Boston and New York City. But guess what? Nobody thinks of them. I mean, for college football, no. I mean, even in Boston, college football isn't big. I lived there for 4 years, and I watched as BC and BU didn't get a tremendous amount of attention because they're just not thought of as football schools. Right. So, and they, I mean, BC is doing much better now. They have in years past.
They're in a conference, so that helps them out.
They're doing much
had
better.
To drop the program.
But it still is all about the money, one way or another, and they've all got to get the money. Next thing, because this is going to affect all of college football before we move on to high school. We got a lot to talk about in high school, so I want to make sure we get this in here. What's happening in the Pac-12 right now is interesting because you have athletes in the Pac-12, young men, football players, who have decided that simply they're not going to take it anymore, and they have decided to rise up and ask for fair treatment in a lot of areas, ask for recognition in other areas, but also placing college football on its heels. Here's a report from Utah which talks about what's coming in the Pac-12 and then the ramifications that could have across college football.
The Utes' first home game is set for here at Rice-Eccles on October 10th. But some Pac-12 athletes say they're willing to sit out this season if some compensation and health demands aren't met. This is the page that got the hashtag #WeAreUnited trending Sunday morning. The Players Tribune website posted a list of demands with the author named only as players of the Pac-12. The piece begins with 15 reasons for the athletes joining together. One reads, because NCAA sports exploit college athletes physically, economically, and academically, and disproportionately harm black college athletes, we are united. Another says because we should not be stuck with sports-related medical expenses, including COVID-19 related expenses, we are united. That list is followed by 4 groups of demands, ranging from COVID safety standards to student-athletes' pay. The group calls for Pac-12 Commissioner Larry Scott, school administrators, and coaches to take a pay cut to prevent sports from being dropped amid the economic crisis. They also propose hiring a third party to address injuries in athletes' health. And on the issue of compensation, the players say they want the conference to split its revenue down the middle, sharing 50% with student-athletes. According to numbers released by the Pac-12 in July, the conference raked in more than $500 million in 2019. The players want a piece of that pie. While no individual athletes are named in the demands, Ute defensive lineman Nick Ford posted this statement on Twitter supporting the movement. He said, quote, I just want safety for me, my brothers on other teams, and coaches alike. We are not just a football team and entertainment. Ford is not alone. Several other members of the Utah football team retweeted support for the cause. The authors of the demands claimed they'll opt out of playing games unless an agreement can be reached.
Larry, this has been building now for a couple of years, and this has reached a critical point where college football is going to have to address this. First of all, asking somebody to take a pay cut at a university, that's not going to happen. Split the revenue down the middle, that sure as hell isn't going to happen. But I think what these players are talking about that is a bigger issue to me is the COVID-19 safety. Because if these colleges come back and play, how much insurance and how well medically are the players going to be covered if a 20-year-old college football player contracts COVID-19, is sick for 6 months, and then he is found to be physically afflicted or damaged, if you will, by COVID-19, which is going to affect the rest of his life, and he will never play college athletics ever again. Hell, with college athletics, he may not be able to get out of a wheelchair ever again. Look, I know I'm extrapolating here, and people are going to say, you're trying to scare me. but I'm going to the end here. I think these players have a better idea and a better stance if they stand on the COVID-19 itself and say, if you can't make me safe, male athlete, female athlete, it makes no difference. If you can't guarantee my safety, then I'm not going to show up. And you and I both know there's no way in hell they can guarantee their safety. They can say it, but it can't happen.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And the very fact that we talked about a few minutes ago that we don't know enough about this disease. We don't know of this virus. We don't know enough about it. So how can we definitively say anything when it talks about the future? And that's why the thing that gets me, and I laugh about it all the time, is how people are trying to put a time limit on this. It's going to be we first heard, if we remember, and it's not being political, it's just being truthful, but back in March, we heard that it was going to be over by Easter, and that didn't happen. And then July 4th. And that didn't happen. So if you're going to continue to put a time limit on something that we don't even have a vaccine for yet. And that's what's so confusing. And I know it splits people apart, but I don't care anymore. I'm going on what science says. That's what the colleges are going on. That's what businesses are going on.
Well, but I'm not sure the colleges are going on that, though. See, that's the problem.
Well, some are. Some are,
but all of them aren't. And that's the big key. When it's not only the colleges, but it's the high school and the athletic associations, they're not following science. Because there's this report out from the Henry Ford system that says, don't worry, hydrochloroquine is okay and it actually helps take care of the disease and holds down the virus's effects early on. Bullspit. Right. That's not been proven. It's a peer-reviewed study. It hasn't been put through enough of the ringer. It's an absolute of a fraud that they're presenting here. And even the doctors that I talk to say they can't do this. They can say it, but it's just not true. And that's the issue. We have colleges and high school athletic associations who are falling for this when, I don't know, call me crazy, Larry, which a lot of people have, and I'm sure they will again. It's okay with me. But I'm erring on the side of caution here, and I don't hear a lot of people erring on the side of caution. I think that's the biggest concern.
Yeah, well, it's because of the fact that everybody is going in every different direction, and you just alluded to it. People are listening to everything, and they're not listening to the right things, and they're taking this information and they're running with it like it's gospel, and it's not. Again, we don't know enough about this.
We're not doctors. You're not. I'm not.
No.
We're not epidemiologists. No. Guess what? We have to worry about the scientific people because they're the ones that do this. But the problem with it is, you've got, and I bet you were going to go there too, even some of the people who are doctors, they've got medical degrees and licenses. They've said that we can get out of this and that it's a hoax. Look, like I told somebody the other day, I said, just because somebody gets a medical degree doesn't mean they got it out of a box of literal Cracker Jacks. And they're right all the time. Not even doctors are wrong sometimes, but you got to look at the ones that actually have the experience, not the one that's out in California somewhere worried about how many butt plugs and hair plugs he can put in somebody because that's part of his practice.
Yeah, well, this isn't a great analogy, but first of all, I mean, I'm listening to the weather the other day, and we're talking about the hurricane season, and we're listening to people at Colorado State University talk about the hurricane season. That's like us here in South Florida or throughout the state talking about winter, and it just I don't buy into it. And I know that a lot of people are picking on Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, but they are the faces of this from the beginning. You're talking about the CDC. You're talking about people who have spent their lives looking at all types of infections, of diseases, and they have more of a basis to go on than anybody does. So I'm not listening to the guy in the California strip mall. I'm sorry. It's nice. It's nice for him to to interject what he thinks is wrong. But at the end of the day, I'm going to listen. If I'm going to listen to anybody, it's going to be scientific people who have devoted 45 years of their lives to researching all types of viruses, diseases, plagues, everything. And even if they're not 100% or even 50% familiar with this, I'm listening to them more than I am Joe up in Dubuque, Iowa, who just opened that next to Denny's there, opened up that nice little doctor's office. That's all of a sudden he's going to claim, that he knows it all. So that's what I'm going to listen to. And I think not telling anybody out there to do the same, but be wise on who you're listening to, because when you get that information and you start spreading it around, that's how all this starts.
Which is part of this, because let's go ahead. We've hit college football. Let's go ahead and switch to high school football now, because we got a bunch of things that I do want to talk about here. And let's specifically talk about this idea of what we can do, what they can do, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. Because it doesn't really make a difference how far you believe on one side or the other. There are medical guidelines here, which are the single most important thing when it comes to deciding when student athletes can go back to high school. In the state of Ohio, right now they are at the point where if you listen, and you'll hear it here in a second, if you listen, you'll hear that regarding high school athletes living by these conditions and these medical guidelines is nearly impossible.
Practice may have started for local schools, but actual competition may be in question if they must follow certain health orders sent down by the state. It involves testing athletes, coaches, and staff for COVID-19 3 days before competing. I asked the county medical director how it would be possible for schools to follow these guidelines, and she said as of right now, it's probably not.
We don't have testing for everyone, and we certainly don't have testing for people without symptoms who are traveling or who may need it for another reason, such as to attend an athletic event.
Section 10 states a negative COVID-19 test is required before traveling to competition, and a test must be administered to each athlete and team staff member no more than 72 hours before the start of competition, and results must be in hand prior. And even more testing if there's a tournament that lasts more than 4 days. That may be something professional sports teams can accomplish, but for school systems, it would cost a fortune, and there's another hitch.
We have very limited testing capabilities. We have nationally a reagent shortage, which means the chemicals that are used to actually run the PCR test.
Testing is at a premium and limited, even in cases that actually need it.
We have trouble even getting people tested who are part of cluster investigations sometimes. We can't even get those individuals tested, and we know they were exposed.
Larry, there's a question we need to put to parents, administrators, and everybody involved in watching this conversation now. Who's going to pay for it?
Exactly. No, that's a great question, and I hope everybody was watching that little segment, because you've done an extremely awesome job, Ed, in researching this. You and I were talking before the show of how you were running down every single state, what's going on, and it's amazing. People just think that it's isolated to one place, and if you listen to lovely Christy Noem from South Dakota, she lives in Shangri-La, and that's fine, and my neighborhood has more people than her whole state does. So you have to understand that it goes by regions, even in the Sunshine State of Florida, where we illustrated from Key West to the state line in Alabama. It's 865 miles. So it's like being in two different states. So you have to understand that nobody's going to be able to afford to do all this. I mean, NFL, colleges, Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, everybody, they're having a tough time coping. For those who aren't in a bubble, you look at baseball. We've already seen it with the Marlins. We've seen it now with the Phillies and now with the Cardinals. If these organizations that have so much more money than these high schools will ever dream of having cannot keep this under control and cannot definitively pinpoint things, how the heck they're going to do it at the high school level?
Well, that's what no one seems to think about. Let me ask the parents a question. Are you going to pay for it? The school comes to the parent and says, okay, we have all these tests, and we have the tournament tests. Let's forget for the fact that there's not enough reagents, which is something the doctor said, which people need to really understand, because the reagent is part of the test for COVID-19. If you don't have it, you can't do the test. Sure. Members of my family have been struck by this because they haven't been able to get their tests because there haven't been enough. So there's not enough. Let's put that aside for a moment. But they're going to come to you, the parent. They're going to say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, you want your kid to play? Absolutely. Here are the tests that we have set out that your student athlete must undertake in order to play. The cost of these tests is going to be $750. I'm just making up a number. I'm throwing it out.
Well, whatever it is.
Whatever it is. But there's going to be the cost. at this time in our society where so many people are out of work, a record number of people are out of work right now. They're basically being helped by the government. They're killing their life savings right now. I've talked to several people who have destroyed their IRAs right now and their retirement accounts, having to live through this. So if they come to you, and if you've got more than one child, you got a couple of kids, and they say it's going to cost you $500, $600, $700, $1,000 to do this, are you going to scream who's going to pay for it? You're the one that's got to pay for it. And we're not saying that you should, but we're saying that needs to be part of the discussion process. If you think about it, we can't do this. Then you've got to make a decision, and you've got to make it based on what's right for the child, but you've got to make it economically. We haven't talked a lot about the economics here, Larry, because we mentioned that the high schools themselves are going to be losing money. A lot of the associations will. But the families, think for a minute like that. I honestly don't know of a lot of parents that I can think of right off the top of my head who would say, whatever it is, write a check, give them the credit card. I don't think that's going to happen.
No. Well, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we heard a report from Jacksonville, Florida, from Duval County, and I think we're talking. It was one of the, I believe, an administrator, also a trainer, and we're talking about the cost from everything from shields to sanitizers to everything that's going to involve to even have a practice. Forget about a game and forget about loading kids on a bus and being able to keep them separated in any way. But do you know that right after that report, people in Jacksonville are calling me and telling me, oh, that's not right. We're playing anyway. See, they're disregarding what was fact. This wasn't a hearsay. This young lady was the head of the athletics in Duval County, which is Jacksonville. And she was stating for a fact, as you just said, who's going to pay for it? We don't have.
I mean, it's not coming out of tax dollars. What do they think? That you've already got a tax base in just about every city in America right now that is slowly being depleted because people can't even pay their taxes in some cases right now. And they're having to give benefits to some of the folks who can't pay it because they can't eat, they can't feed their kids, they can't pay their mortgage, they can't pay their rent right now. So if it's going to come out of the taxes, knowing that the tax base is going to be hurt by the fact that a huge majority of Americans are out of work right now, what are you going to trade at that point? Okay, here, I'll make a deal, and parents will hate me for this. Go ahead, but I'd love to hear, because the comment lines are open on YouTube and on Facebook as we do this show live, because here's the question. Are you willing to send your kid to play high school sports if the county comes back to you and says, we're going to cut services? We're going to have to cut EMT services. We're going to have to cut some of the medical services. We're also going to have to dig into the roads. We're going to have to dig into some of the other issues and some of the things that are taken care of by the county right now. They won't happen because your kid is going to play high school athletics. Would you be willing to do that? I can't imagine anybody doing that. But I got to be wrong.
Yeah, well, you're going to get some people. But here's my point. We're not even 5 months into this. 5 months. I mean, can you imagine if this went on for a year, 2 years? People would be jumping off buildings because of the very fact that we just talked about money. And if we're people, like you just said, even in a lot of places where they are coming back and allowing, dining or allowing businesses to open, they're doing it a scaled back, which means there's 50% to 60% of every business, restaurant still has employees that are not working. So they're not being able to pay bills. So you're going to ask those parents who have been laid off, brought back only to be let go, or even working part-time, getting unemployment, which is right now in kind of a flux anyway. I mean, and I know in some,
not everybody's getting it. It's not that easy.
No, it's not that easy. But you look at, and the one thing that I did do is when they started the unemployment back in March, April, whenever they started that, I looked at all the states, even with the $600 government supplement that they were going to give you. I mean, and it's sorely, if anything that has happened in any of this, not in just a negative way. We're seeing politicians who were elected that are not performing when you need them to. Events like unemployment, where in a lot of states, and I'll only can speak on Florida, which is a mess. The lowest, one of the biggest states in the country, is the lowest paid per week at $275 unemployment. Heck, you got Michigan, Minnesota in the $600-700 range per week without the $600. So that's what I'm saying. We're seeing a lot of things, and then you're going to ask these parents who are knifing through their savings as we speak, savings that they had hoped to kind of keep maybe for that college education or for those trips or for something, they work their butts off year round. So we're asking them to go into that, and then we're going to ask them for $600-700 to play an athletic season.
If you're going to think about everything, let's think about everything. We want your kids. We want all the kids to go to school. We want everybody. We want to open the schools. We want to make sure. There's another issue about kids being able to stay 6 feet apart in crowded classrooms. We'll leave that to the teachers because they've got to worry about that. But we want all the kids to get back playing football and basketball and volleyball and golf and everything. But no one is looking at the tremendous amount of money this is going to cost.
Amazing.
And the government can't just keep shoveling and printing money because it's going to come back and snap eventually. And everybody has got to get to work. I'd rather take that money and help people find jobs and help people feed their kids and be able to pay their mortgage and their rent than have to worry about their young man or young lady playing a sport. Again, I'm not a parent, so that's easy for me to say, but I think taking care of my kids in that sense is a lot more important than a sport. Now, sport. Let's get to two things real quick. I want to play two reports here, and I want you to comment on them, because we have that issue of where we're going to go next. Because while we have Ohio State's, the state of Ohio, their guidelines are just nearly impossible if you listen to them. If you see what they're doing in Colorado, which is interesting, and you've talked about this, Colorado has decided to shift all of their sports to spring.
The important thing, all 29 sports are scheduled to happen. Now, here's the breakdown. Like I said, all of those fall sports, they were approved, the ones that I mentioned, but all contact sports, they've been pushed back into 4 different segments. Notably, football approved for February 22nd, with a championship culminating on May 8th. Now, this is an interesting note. After the 4 fall sports finish on October 18th, there will be a 3-month moratorium before season B begins. Chassa says that is to protect the seasons without any disruption in case of another wave in late fall or early winter. Commissioner Rhonda Blanford Green says they came up with this quadrant plan in June, but this was just a contingency plan.
There are certain sports that we could not conduct this fall under the state guidelines, not Chassa guidelines, the state guidelines. And so when we saw a resurgence in our state, we had to come up with plan B. We had to come up with plan C. We had to resubmit. And so where we are today, we feel very good about the ability to not have disruptions, to not have cancellations, and to try to give every kid in the state of Colorado the opportunity to participate in a sport and in a season that they love.
A few things that we did talk about were how are kids going to manage their multi-sport seasons. She said, well, it's really not going to be too much different because they do overlap anyway. I think it's going to be a little bit more of an overlap this time. But honestly, as long as there's an option for kids to play at all this season, I consider this a win, Tom.
Larry, what do you think? Is that a win?
Well, it depends. There's going to be, from my
depends
case,
on how you look at victory.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of ways to look at victory, and I just think that they're doing, which a lot of people need to start doing, is doing it with the athletes and the students in mind. They're going to give them a better, you're talking about 6 months down the line. We're hoping that things are a lot better, and that's what they're banking on. I mean, so I can't fault anybody who's doing that. My own football scenario, and then we went over this, I think last week or the week before, was to start things right after Christmas in January. Get the kids 2 weeks, of practice. There's, let's not fool anybody. The kids are staying active now. They're getting in the weight room of their own. Some of the schools are going into the weight room, but when I said January, you have to, again. And I want to reiterate this again, Ed, that there's going to have to be some sacrifices made. This is something that's a once in a lifetime, we're hoping, type of deal that we're going through. And I think if you're sacrificing as a senior, not playing basketball or wrestling in addition to play football, so be it. If you're going to play football, and you've already had your 2-3 years to do it, and I'm not minimizing it, but it's not the end of the world. Let's say, God forbid, you're playing football in October and November and you blow out your ACL. So you're missing basketball anyway, and you're missing wrestling anyway. So chalk it up to that. Stop being so selfish. Understand that, this. And the one thing that we missed, again, I know we're talking so heavily on academics, but more than anything, I'd like to get the kids back in the classroom. This distance learning is just not healthy. It just really isn't healthy. There's no interaction. These kids, are being taxed to the fact that most of them haven't put on, a pair of slacks and shoes in 5 months. Hell,
are you kidding? Most of us adults haven't put on a pair of slacks and shoes in 4 months.
True, but they have their whole lives ahead of them. We're not in that situation where we're gonna be doing. I think our days of getting dressed every single day and getting ready, are not what they're going through. But I'm just saying, that's the one thing that. Yeah, one thing that's more important to me is to get these kids back in the classroom. Just a healthier mind, interaction with the kids. I think they're kind of tired of seeing the kids, on FaceTime.
I think the kids are
and
tired of seeing their parents. Look,
no doubt.
I work out of my studio. I work out of my office. My dogs are tired of seeing me at this point.
Yeah,
it's like they look all day. They go, "Aren't you leaving, dude? You used to leave for a while. Aren't you going somewhere where we can at least go ahead and chew up the couch without having to worry about you being here to do it?" So I think that's all fair. Now, here's the second way to do things, because Colorado has decided they're going to shift everything to spring, and I think people need to understand what was talked about in that report is nothing between October and January, because they're going to wait and see what happens. It's that dreaded second wave. In Minnesota, they're talking about a different model, and that's a 4-season sports model, which is interesting in itself. Don't know if it's going to work, but here's what they're going to do, or here's what they're thinking about doing in Minnesota.
The Minnesota State High School League is moving to a 4-season sports model. Football and volleyball will now be considered spring sports, running from March to May. Traditional spring sports like baseball, softball, and track will become summer sports from May to July. Canada It All begins our team coverage with how student athletes and their families are feeling.
Though Minnesota Select Volleyball Club has been back in action for weeks, club leaders weren't shocked to see the high school season delayed.
I understand the decision they had to make, honestly. Yeah, we've been doing it in a building, but those kids aren't going to any school together.
There's part of me that really wanted it to go forward, but then, there's also the other side where you don't want anybody to get really sick.
Maple Grove senior Skylar Gray says she's also split about the potential of now choosing between club and high school volleyball this spring.
And that would be really hard because I like both aspects of it, because in club you get really good competition, but in high school you form a lot of friendships and bonds. So it's kind of like you have to choose which one you want to go with.
But if we have people that care about kids, this can work.
Scott Jackson, who coaches both club and high school, says he's hopeful for a way both seasons can happen safely.
Hopefully the State High School League is like, hey, this is new. Let's share a little bit this year. Let's get through this time period. And then those kids can be seen by, what will be hundreds of coaches in our city.
For football players like Maple Grove senior Nate Elms, a delayed season could be his only shot to get noticed.
I was in contact with a couple colleges, and they all said the same thing. They said, we're really looking forward to your senior year. When I started getting that news that it might not happen, I was getting kind of nervous. I'm just thankful that I get to play.
You want the kids to have confidence that, your dreams can continue.
Coach Matt Lombardi is hopeful the added months to develop safety plans will bring that confidence, and not just for those hoping to play in college.
For many of them, for 95% of those kids, when that senior year is done, they're done playing football. All the other sports, hockey, they all kind of continue. Football is a genuine high school sport. You don't want to take it from these kids because for a lot of them, this is their time to have it.
So, Larry, in essence, we're talking here about year-round sports in high school with no summer off and every school doing that. Again, the first thing that comes to my mind is money in something like that. But maybe it's not such a bad idea because you actually have athletes playing sports or doing something in summer which may keep them away from some of these ridiculously overpriced, undercutting, and shifty camps that are out there, which we'll talk about momentarily. So what do you think about a year-round curriculum for sports?
In some places you could do that. I don't think you could do that everywhere. Especially, I mean, you're talking about most of those guys, those kids, and like to go on to college, and most enter early. Early now is January, but let's just speak, just on behalf of kids who just go in the regular time. That's at the end of May, early June. So that means you're going to be playing a baseball season, and if you're a draftable guy, you're not going to be playing your high school senior year because you're going to be drafted, and you're going to hopefully that the minor leagues will get kind of back to playing, and you'll be going there or going to college.
Well, from a playing standpoint, that wouldn't seem to be a bad idea if you've got the 1 year that you go. But academically, you're coughing up your senior year of high school, which is supposed to be when at least you learn. So again, we're talking about cutting academics, are we not?
Yeah, you are. I mean, but you see, that's it. Everybody's basing this on athletics and not academics. So I would like to see somebody interject one time and come strong with an academic game plan. Okay, so you just gave me your athletic game plan, and let me see if I can fit this into the academics. And remember, the teachers are only getting paid, what, 8-9 months a year to teach?
It's a crime.
Well,
it's a crime too, because then you'd have to shift schedules around. People who take normal summer vacations would have to change because, well, maybe not, because if you're going to, well, see, this is a discussion maybe, and we need to have this another day when we have more time, but maybe it is not a bad idea to have year-round high school at this point, because then you have people who will graduate at certain times. They won't graduate at the standard time. They'd be able to cut different schedules, and maybe there's a way to do that, and maybe it's better academically.
Well, they do have year-round schools. I know in the state of, I mean, elementary schools have them, middle schools have them. I haven't seen high schools have year-round schools, but I guess if you can go by the same template that elementary schools, like they'll go, I think they have like a period, they have 3 different extended 3-week breaks, in between. So, instead of having 3 months off, or what is it? I think they have 3. They do have the same time off, but they just don't have it from June, July, and August.
Right. It's a different time span. It's not in those months.
Yeah, no, it's not in those months. But let's say they go to school. Let's say the calendar year starts in August. Their first break will be around Thanksgiving, and then they come back at the end of the first of the year, and then they'll go to May, they'll come back in June, like that. So they do get their vacation time. It's just not 3 months. And for some people, I think that's even better, because it's just really tough to, even when we were kids, there's so much you could do during the summer. For 3 long months, I mean, we used to get out in June and didn't come back till right after Labor Day. That's, so I mean, you're talking about enough is enough. But I listen, I'm not adverse about that, but I need to have an academic game plan in there too, because if not, then then we come down to the thing is you're just going to play sports. No, you're going to get an education. These teachers work damn hard. They work hard on getting this diploma to teach you and work hard on their curriculum. And that's what I'm saying. Listen, for years and years and years, this wouldn't be Larry Blustein talking, because I didn't care, but now I see the value.
I think that's fair. None of us did. Look, when I was a sportscaster 150 years ago, I wouldn't care about a lot of these things. I mean, specifically the Pac-12 athletes going after saying, we want fair treatment. I would say, shut up and play, will you? You're college athletes. That would have been 20 years ago, 25 years ago, before I realized what was happening. And because you get a little bit older and you do get a little bit wiser, and then you see what we didn't see back then, which was college athletics basically using these players as nothing more than chattel to chew them up and throw them away, which is still basically what they're doing in many ways. And now they're just doing it in high school.
Yeah, true.
Which is even worse. So
different hurdles we have today. So and we see the different ways to get around them and over them, but different time.
Last thing I want to go ahead and touch on, and we mentioned this, is these camps that are being held specifically for football players. You can't really throw a dead cat. It's a phrase, guys. I would never think of it. Kind of an animal, okay? But you can't throw a dead cat and not hit a football camp somewhere in America at some time where somebody's just looking to suck out the money from parents, and they say this is a camp, and we'll look at it, and we'll get you to college. We'll make it easy for you to get scholarships. We'll help your kids along. That's not always the case in a lot of these. And on your Facebook page this week, you posted a statement, which I'm going to read for the audience that's listening to us on audio podcast, because I said, yes, Larry, do this a little more often, man. This is the Larry Blustein I know, because this came right at people. Parents, high school football players, and coaches, I am not in the business of telling you what events to attend here in this extended off season, but if you are invited to attend something during these COVID times, think about it. We are trying to get some kind of season started here in Florida, and if your son is exposed to anyone who may have the disease, is it worth blowing this entire football season up for? Use your head. People who promise you exposure are usually the ones who have the least reputable college contacts. Boy, I hope people read that over and over again. Asking us whether you should attend or not isn't something we will provide. We are the ones who are usually here in March, April, and May cleaning up all those promises that were made. Stay safe and use your own judgment. Those organizers will be nowhere to be found once the check clears. Stay safe and informed. Congratulations, my friend. That needs to be tattooed on the inside of the eyelids of every parent who takes their kids to these camps and thinks that they are going to get them into college faster. Is it not fair to say that there are more disreputable camps in America than there are reputable ones? Or am I exaggerating?
Well, no, there's the point of this now, Ed, is the fact of the timing. It's irresponsible, first of all, to send your kid to a camp now when you and I have spent the last 3 weeks plus talking about ways to get back on the field. This is a way not to get back on the field, because no matter how many masks you're wearing or how much sanitizer you're giving out at these events, it's a selfish way of making money. And that's all. It's a money grab. You're not going to convince me any other way, because these people can run these any time of year. But why do it now? Why do it now when you're
and there's a lot of them out there right now. You would think that in
Yes.
the era of the pandemic, these camps would be shutting down. But they're not. You can still, matter of fact, you can go to websites of some of these disreputable organizations who are nothing more than scam artists, and they'll talk to you all about how, don't worry about it, your kid will still be able to get to college because all you have to do is listen to what we're telling you to in order to come to certain events.
Yeah.
There's a pandemic.
Yeah.
And they're still
there's
telling you to come to events.
There's
That should be
nothing
the first
rational,
tip-off.
and you'll be surprised how many kids will go because the parents are pressured. They feel pressured into going to these events. And I think listen, I have nothing wrong with going to camps. I do them all the time. I use them for
Legitimate
my own personal
camps.
gain. And they're not, and I'm not going to say every single one I've been to is a legitimate camp, but I turn it into a legitimate camp because I'm there, I'm exposing the kids. So even if they're not, I am. So I use that for them, and I hold my own. We have a couple during the year, and the information goes directly to colleges. So, but that's neither here nor there. With this camp, like they're running one this Saturday, and I looked at a lot of the kids on that list that are going, and I'm thinking to myself, I need to call mom and dad and let them know next March when Junior needs some help, getting into a school or me contacting a college, so at least they'll watch the film. Think about this event that you're going to this week, because it's a waste of time. They're draining you for money. That and you read that thing that I wrote out loud. The people who are putting on this event this week or any other place, they have their hands in their ears, not listening to a thing that you read or a thing that I say. They don't care, because they'll put pull up on their smartphone their bank account, and they'll see, wow, look at, I made X amount of dollars this weekend. I don't care what Larry Blustein says. He has no bearing. He's not paying my bills. He doesn't have he's not paying my car insurances and my family. But you know what? The whole thing is, it comes down to morals. And if you don't have morals, it'll come out in the end, Ed. It will come out in the end. People are not going to trust you anymore because you're leading them. It's sort of like leading them into the lions. And that's what you're doing. And everybody knows it. So again, people go, well, you shouldn't blame the people that host the camps. Yeah, I do, because if they didn't have one, parents wouldn't have a decision to make. And these parents are, the one thing that's come out of this, and I have a close friend who used to be the head coach at St. Thomas Aquinas, Rocco Casulo, who's now having a tough time because he just took over Cypress Bay this year, and he's really had no chance to get his team together because of the COVID. But we came together a couple of weeks ago and we said, you know what we need to do when all this stuff goes out? We need to have seminars and have parents come, have some refreshments for them, have a couple of seminars during the course of a month, and explain to them what they should go to and why they shouldn't go to other things. And I think if they understood, because no one's taken the time to ever explain it to them, all they know is that Joey's getting recruited by Florida State and he's going, so I think we should go.
Well, that's just a good point then, Larry, because you brought that up with the comment you made on Facebook. Briefly, how can parents, what's a couple of things they can do? Look, they've known, everybody in the state of Florida, people nationally know you. They know that when you're in an event and you talk about an event, that it is a legitimate event and you only go to those where people are actually real in what they're doing. But how can these parents tell when they're going to something where they're just being taken for their money and the information and their kids' workouts may just wind up going nowhere?
Ed, I have a billion ways you can contact me. And you could always write me through email. You can contact me through my Twitter accounts, through my Facebook accounts. It's if you do that and ask a simple question, and people do. I'm not going to say they don't, because parents will say, hey, Larry, what about this event this weekend? Am I getting anything out of it? And I'll say, listen, from my standpoint, I don't think you are. And I'm not going to down anybody or take money out of their pocket. I'm just going to give advice that they had asked for. I'm not going to go around, to Ed Berliner's house or to Joe Smith's house and start preaching with a sign, don't go to this camp, because that's not what I'm about. But if you ask me, and you're counting on me as somebody who has 50 years of experience in dealing with this, an honest question, I'll give you an honest answer.
See, and at least there's somebody here, because quite frankly, if Blue tells you it's solid, then it's solid. And parents need to ask a lot more questions, because there's far too many of these camps out there. And when I was preparing for the show and we talked a little bit about it, I started looking around at a lot of the camps. And I won't mention the name, but I had sent to you a message. And I had said, what about this one? And you came back to me and said, scam artists. I said, well, that's it. Because, and I was finding them, and all they're doing is promoting what they do, and it sounds so good. Don't worry about it, because we can get your kids' information right into the right hands. Look, there are college
right
scouts,
into the garbage cans.
Exactly. That's where it winds up. There's college scouts out there. I think this is what people need to know, and maybe we'll focus on this next week. But there's college scouts out there, and it's a digital age where they're looking more for the digital ability to be able to tell who the kids are, and a lot of them do it in video. It's changed forever. It's going to be that way forever. We're not going to go back to a lot. And I really would be shocked if once the pandemic is over in 5 years, which is what somebody said to me in a note a couple of days ago. They said, you guys are talking about when COVID-19 is done. It's not going to be done for a long time. And technically they're right. When we get back to a time when it becomes a little bit safer, I don't see a lot of people doing it, because there's money involved in travel. There's money involved in hotels. There's all these coaches that have to fan out across the country. Why do it when you can look, you can get all the information digitally, and you can get it on video? And I'll even again say that we offered to people here, if you have a student athlete that you want to get seen, if you have a student athlete that you can't get seen, and you're absolutely convinced that no one is looking at your student athlete, there's the email, mytickettothearena@gmail.com. You send me an email, and we'll figure out a way to get your information, your video, like a minute or so, whatever, up via Dropbox, and we'll talk about it here. I'll easily set aside 10 minutes a show when we sit here and talk to make sure that your kids get the
we'll do it.
Get the appearance that they need. I don't care if it's golf. I don't care if it's swimming. Whatever it is. If you feel that your kid really needs that push to get a college scholarship, I'll tell you what, because we reach globally as well as anybody else. So instead of paying a couple of $1,000, you come to us and we'll give you a hand.
In closing, I will say this. Next week, we'll give you a little bit to kind of bubble up on, but we'll talk about the recruiting process. And I talk to anybody listening out there. I talk to a coach or coaches from your college, major college, all the way down to NAIA every week. From Power 5 schools, we correspond daily. I mean, I get message as we're talking now. I've gotten 4 messages from Power 5 programs asking about a couple of kids. So we'll talk about what they ask for and what they want and what they're looking for.
Do that.
I think something will change in your mind a little bit.
We'll do that next week. A reminder again, let's make sure that you have all the information on Larry Blustein, because he covers high school, he covers college. He's been doing it for a long time. I trust the man explicitly, and so should you. If you want to get a hold of him on Twitter, those of you watching on YouTube and Facebook, and other places as well where we are seen, because we're now seen live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can get his Twitter at Larry Blustein, at SFHS Sports, and at Prep Red Zone FL for Florida. If you also want to go to his website, one of his sites, go to prepredzoneflorida.com. You can find him there. And the easiest thing to do is, of course, LarryBlustein.com, which is simple. We all have our own names sitting in there. Why? Because we're proud of him, damn it. So make sure that you get a hold of Larry and talk to him about it, ask questions. Blue, always a pleasure, my friend. We'll do some college recruiting next week, and hopefully we'll have some better answers for everybody. Thanks a lot, bud.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you.
All right, man. Larry Blustein, trust him explicitly when it comes to your high school athletics. For those of you watching on the live YouTube and Facebook versions, don't forget, this show will be posted on YouTube at welcomeToTheArena.com. Also, don't forget, all the shows are available on all the major audio podcast platforms within just a couple of hours of the end of the show, so you can download it there. All I ask is please help us all here. Subscribe, like, be part of the audience, and be part of it when we do the shows live here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Damn, we're getting big all of a sudden. For Larry Blustein, the entire crew, I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Rock on, true believers. See ya! For story ideas, comments, start some interesting debates, or just get in touch, join me on social media at Berliner Speaks on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also join me on LinkedIn for business and also sponsorship discussions. There you can search out Ed Berliner. A reminder that all of our episodes on Man in the Arena are available on YouTube. Just go to welcomeToTheArena.com. Every episode of Man in the Arena is also available on audio podcast on all of the major platforms. This has been a presentation of Entourage Management, LLC, and Entourage Media.